When people talk about cursed or unexplained photographs on the internet, the fear rarely comes from the image alone. It comes from the story attached to it. The Cooper family photo, the legend of the rake, the Solway Firth spaceman image, and the Russian sleep experiment all demonstrate how narrative framing can transform ordinary or fabricated material into something that feels historically real. Looking closely at where each originated, how it spread, and what evidence actually exists reveals far more about human psychology and internet culture than about ghosts or secret experiments. The so-called Cooper family photo is usually described as a mid-1950s snapshot taken in Texas after a family moved into a new house. In the image, a smiling family sits around a dining table while, above them, an inverted human figure appears to be falling or hanging from the ceiling. The shock value comes from the juxtaposition, domestic normality paired with something violently wrong. The problem is that there is no verifiable Cooper family connected to the photograph, no original negative that can be traced to a specific camera or studio, and no confirmed documentation placing it in Texas in the 1950s. The image first circulated widely online around the late 2000s, especially on horror and paranormal forums. Digital analysts have pointed out irregularities in lighting and composition that suggest the falling body was composited into an otherwise normal vintage-styled photograph. The vignetting around the edges appears artificially applied to evoke an aged effect, and the tonal balance between the family and the inverted figure does not perfectly match, hinting at layering. What makes the image powerful is not evidence of the paranormal, but its aesthetic mimicry of mid-century photography. It taps into the uncanny effect of corrupted nostalgia, the idea that something evil intruded into a wholesome past moment. In all likelihood, the image is a piece of horror art deliberately crafted to resemble a found family photograph, with the backstory invented afterward to deepen the sense of authenticity. The rake is an even clearer case of modern mythmaking. Unlike the Cooper photo, which at least pretends to be a historical artifact, the rake emerged openly from internet horror communities in the late 2000s. It was popularized on forums devoted to creepypasta, a genre of short horror fiction presented as though it were real testimony. The creature is described as pale, emaciated, hairless, and humanoid, often seen crouching or crawling in distorted positions. Various images are associated with it, typically grainy photographs of strange shapes in dark rooms or forests. None of these images can be traced to a verified incident involving a real unknown creature. Instead, they are almost always either manipulated photographs, unrelated images repurposed to fit the myth, or later digital creations inspired by the story itself. The rake follows a recognizable pattern in folklore evolution. Anonymous users collaborate, intentionally or not, to build a shared mythology. Someone writes a diary entry describing a sighting. Another person adds supposed historical references stretching back decades or even centuries. A third contributes an altered image. Over time, the repetition of these elements produces a sense of accumulated evidence. But there are no police reports, no scientific records, no credible witnesses outside the online narrative sphere. The rake exists as a fictional construct that demonstrates how easily horror can be crowdsourced in the digital age. The Solway Firth spaceman photograph is different because it genuinely originates from a real person at a documented time and place. In 1964, Jim Templeton photographed his young daughter on Burgh Marsh near the Solway Firth in England. When the film was developed, one frame appeared to show a figure standing behind the child, seemingly wearing a white suit with a dark visor, strongly resembling an astronaut. The photograph gained national attention in the United Kingdom and beyond. Templeton maintained that he had not seen anyone behind his daughter at the time, Kodak reportedly examined the negative and stated that it showed no evidence of tampering. This lack of obvious manipulation fueled speculation. However, later analysis offered a far simpler explanation. Templeton's wife had been present and was wearing a pale blue dress. Because of the brightness of the sky and the exposure settings, her dress could have appeared white in the photograph. Early cameras often captured a wider field than what the photographer could see through the viewfinder, meaning someone slightly off to the side could appear in the final image unexpectedly. When the figure is examined closely, the supposed helmet can be interpreted as dark hair and shadow, and the stance aligns with someone turning away from the camera. The photograph is real in the sense that it is an authentic image from 1964, but the extraterrestrial interpretation is almost certainly a misreading shaped by cultural fascination with the space race era and unidentified flying object phenomena. The Russian sleep experiment is perhaps the most elaborate of the legends mentioned, yet it is also the most transparently fictional in origin. The story first appeared online in the early 2000s, written in the style of a declassified Soviet document. It describes prisoners in a secret Soviet laboratory kept awake for 15 days using a stimulant gas, eventually descending into madness, mutilation, and monstrous transformation. Graphic images often accompany reposts of the story, including photographs of grotesque skeletal figures. These images are frequently claimed to be leaked evidence from the experiment. In reality, the story was posted as a piece of horror fiction, and no historical documentation supports the existence of such an experiment. The chemical described does not match any known compound, and the physiological effects exceed what is medically documented about sleep deprivation. Severe sleep deprivation can cause hallucinations, paranoia, cognitive breakdown, and even psychosis, but it does not produce superhuman endurance or the extreme physical transformations described in the narrative. Many of the disturbing images tied to the legend are photographs of Halloween props, art installations, or unrelated medical imagery repurposed to lend credibility to the tale. The power of the Russian sleep experiment lies in its plausibility at the edges. The 20th century did see unethical human experimentation in various countries, including the Soviet Union, which makes the premise feel possible. The story exploits that historical backdrop to anchor its horror in something that feels grounded. Across all four cases, the common thread is ambiguity combined with storytelling. A strange shape in a photograph leaves room for interpretation. An anonymous post framed as a recovered document invites suspension of disbelief. When such material spreads online, repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity often breeds perceived legitimacy. None of these examples provide verified evidence of paranormal events or secret supernatural occurrences. The Cooper family image appears to be constructed horror art with an invented mid-century backstory. The Rake is a collaborative internet monster born from creepypasta culture. The Solway Firth spaceman is an authentic photograph most plausibly explained by misidentification and photographic quirks. The Russian sleep experiment is a fictional narrative that leverages real fears about government secrecy and human experimentation. What makes them enduring is not their factual basis but their emotional impact. They trigger primal fears, the corruption of home, the intrusion of an inhuman presence, the possibility of extraterrestrial contact, the horror of scientific cruelty. In each case, the image or story becomes a canvas onto which audiences project anxieties. The deeper you investigate their origins, the more ordinary the explanations become. Yet the myths persist because uncertainty is often more compelling than resolution.